Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Boys. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, first and foremost, we kind of get a little more insight into everything that Soldier Boy went through, because he has like impenetrable skin, and it seems like it's reflected on his insides as well. They experimented on everything. Like, yes, nothing could pierce his skin, but he could still feel the pain. So them unloading like shooting guns inside of him, burning him, doing everything they can. Obviously, MM has no sympathy for him, because it's almost probably like, that's what this bastard deserved. I want him to suffer, but probably more so than suffer, I want him dead. So then because they're still in Russia at this point in time, and Kimiko needs to get back to a doctor, so Butcher's like, we need to leave here, but MM's like, shut up, don't pretend like you care about Kimiko, this isn't about that, you just have a little bit of a guilty conscience of like, right, this all went down because of you, you're the one that wanted to come here, you're the one to set up the whole thing with Little Nina, you're the one that made Kimiko go out there and kill, and so it's like, yeah, it's on you, but he's also like, yeah, but look at me, you could be pissed at me about what I did, but at very least, what I did as, you know, taking the temporary V, made it so that I saved all your lives, so you should be grateful. But it's that conversation that I love that's in the trailer, that MM says that this is basically everything we're fighting against. We have to stay the way we are, because the point is no one is supposed to have that kind of power. But for Butcher, it's like, no, like, you go ahead and live your fantasy land of like, we can keep on doing things our way, or we could do them this way and we can have actual results. Because he even talks about it later with Maid. It's like, it used to take them months to construct a way. They had to find roundabout ways to kill. They had to get smart about it. I mean, like, use the first example in the show, Translucent. Like, they had to find a roundabout way of killing him. You know, you have to like get very creative with how you do it. But it's like, oh, he's like, gunpowder? I was able to kill him no time flat. So, and she's like, oh, that must have felt good, because it's like, right, you enjoy killing Soups, and he's like, yeah, but I hated every minute of it, because once again, to kill the monsters I'm after, I had to become a monster, like, every second, because for him, it's not like, oh, I'm able to, I became more me. Butcher hates himself to his core, but he knows that at least he justifies what he does is necessary. Doesn't mean he likes that aspects of himself. He'll say like, oh, like, you know, I'm kind of a necessary evil, but he doesn't truly believe that. He knows like, I am a shitty human being. I think he can definitely see the parallels between himself and Homelander. He probably would never outwardly admit it, how they are mirror images to each other in so many regards. I don't know if he'd ever acknowledge that, but at the very least, he recognized, I'm an asshole. He said so as much, but I think he'll try and justify it being like, the mission comes first. I can deal with the consequences of my assholeness after the fact. But for now, I need to go forward. I need to end this. Because I think that's a beautiful element to this. I mean, just to show in general, but this episode, when it comes to the element of people doing whatever they believe, try to justify their actions. Everyone's going to believe, like, regardless of the shitty things I have to do, I'm doing it for the greater good, so it all works out in the end, you know, even if there is some selfishness involved in it. Then there's also, I feel bad for Annie, because every time she asks someone to do the right thing in this episode, I mean, just in general, they typically don't. We'll kind of run through some of those, but it's like, yeah, every step of the way in this episode, when she asks someone to try and do the right thing, they wouldn't. So I think that's definitely going to be an interesting element. I was wondering about, really quickly too, back to Butcher. I thought the whole him and Maeve thing was interesting. I figured that would be, I was like, is that about to happen? And I was like, I wasn't sure. And she kissed him, and then it's like, oh, she's like, what, you think you're too good for me? It's like, no. He thinks, like, how low he thinks of Soups, he thinks the same way too, and it's just like, they bang it out. Because a lot of what he said, because though I think it's so interesting, because those two characters hate themselves so much. Probably hate themselves just as much as they hate Homelander. Because even she's like, wow, and I thought I hated him, you hate him. But for him, it's like, right, Soups are just, it just amplifies who you are. Paraphrasing him, the actual phrase is, with great power comes absolute certainty of turning into a right cunt. It's, you know, it's like, right, you are going to be it just amplifies what's already there. If you're an asshole and you get powers, you're just going to continue being an asshole. What's deeper inside of you? Maybe the argument could be like it contorts some of what's already there. Like those darker elements of you, it brings them more to the forefront. But even those good nature aspects, so you get contorted. But that's why for Butcher, it's like, it's not just Homelander. All of you are bad. All soup suck because you're all god-awful at the end of the day. And it's like, right, when we've seen time and time again, that power has corrupted so many people. We've never got to know who Homelander was. I mean, he's been this way. They've all been this way since they were kids, but we don't, Starlight is one of the few examples of someone who's held on to their humanity. You have someone like Maeve, who has lost it along the way, but she has, over the course of the show, started to get it back. So, but I think it's just that moment of like, right, we're two people who hate ourselves so much that it's almost like hate fucking. It's what I kind of like chalk that up to. Other elements to this is the whole situation with Homelander. He made Ashley CEO. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, everything you went through to get here is like, yeah, but I'm like, and even later Starlight asks a question, is it worth it? And it's like, it's not. All the stress you had to go through, having a homicidal maniac like Homelander as your boss, but you don't say no to Homelander. Plus, I guess it's like, it's a combination of fear and ambition is what drives so many people in this show, and Ashley is no exception to that. So he's like, cool, guys, go around, everyone introduces themselves, and then it gets to that lady, and she's like, okay, so, do you want to talk about this? It's like some stuff that Homelander doesn't understand, and he's like, do you think you deserve this job? She's like, what? No. He's like, do you want to be here? Do you think I'm fucking stupid? Do you want to be here and you want me to be there? And she's like, no, that's not what it is. And Ashley's like, leave before you embarrass yourself anymore. It's like, yeah, leave before he snaps and kills you. So it's like, yeah, and it showcases what it is that, they have to placate his ego. It's like, yeah, you're jumping into a billion-dollar corporation, a worldwide corporation at that, and you're like, pissed that people are talking down to you. It's like, she's talking some probably like basic level stuff and just, like this is some everyday stuff. You wanted to be head honcho, and it shows in that instant that you're like, oh yeah, like, wait, but he took it as an attack of like, you're trying to make me seem fucking stupid. Is that what it is? It's like, no. She's like, I'm so sorry. She's like, I know, I'm stupid. She's like, you're great. I'm like, the fact is that you are a child. Everyone has to placate you. And it's just, I don't know, because he's still in that realm of, I don't care if people are afraid of me and they're pretending to love me. That's all I need. But it's like when those cracks in it start popping up of like, okay, the delusion he has of people loving him and respecting him, once that starts cracking, that's when he gets irritated, because like this, he's built this narrative, this false reality around himself, this perception that everyone once again loves him, that he's so great, he's so amazing. But when people shatter that, like she did by saying something, making him feel inadequate, making him feel stupid, it's like, no, I'm the best, I'm amazing, you don't make me feel inadequate, you don't do that, I'm great, so once again, he is such an egotistical asshole that any blow to his ego is just seen as, he sees everything as an attack against him, I love that, obviously we spent a little time with Soldier Boy this episode, and I love that, obviously, he escaped Russia, he found his way to the U.S., and obviously the reality of everything. You see, like, the poster for Dawn of the Seven, he's just like, ugh, like, he's disgusted. It's like, wait, what the fuck is that? Because the top team back in the day was him and Payback. Obviously, many, many years have passed by, so he's been locked up all that time, so he's been locked up for decades, so he isn't aware. And then he sees some of the Maeve Pride stuff, and he sees, like, two guys together, and he's just looking like, ugh, like, without even saying anything, just that look just shows you who he is. I mean, granted, we know how much of an asshole he is. Just that little bit we got in episode 3 showcase how much of an asshole he was. But obviously he has PTSD from everything he went through in Russia, and he accidentally erupts, and he ends up blowing, incinerating a whole bunch of people. So it isn't just a full-blown fired cannon. It does seem like it can, well, I guess it's a combination of the two, because it seems like it can kind of shoot out like a cannon, but also kind of erupt near him, but, it vaporizes everything in its wake. Other elements are Huey and Starlight. Huey telling Starlight everything about, Soldier Boy and him taking the temporary V. And she's like, because he's like, yeah, but you're right, the hangover was terrible. And he was like, and she was like, you loved it, didn't you? He was like, oh yeah, I really fucking loved it. And you can tell, like, that right there is some addictive stuff. Because even Butcher said, I've taken so many drugs in my, he's like, I've done coke, I've done I've done meth. Nothing hits like compound temp V does. It's like, it's addictive. And he doesn't show these same addicted qualities that Huey has. Maybe Huey's never taken any drugs, but maybe it's also Huey has that addictive personality. But at one point in time, while Huey was throwing up, Butcher saw a little boy. I don't know whether that was supposed to be him as a little boy, maybe his little brother, whatever the case may be. Because once again, the parallels have already been set up based on last season of Huey he sees a little bit of his brother. Once again, I believe his brother's name was Lenny. He sees so much of his brother in Huey that, he feels guilty because I am bringing you down this road, but we got to get shit done. Especially in a time when everyone is pulling away from him and Huey's pulling closer. Of course, he wants to push Huey away, but having Huey by his side, it's like, right, maybe because he still wants to believe, like MM said last season, that Huey's his canary. But like I said, Huey's no longer your canary. He's on the deep end too. MM's playing the role of trying to be, MM's trying to be his canary, maybe even Huey's, but Annie's his canary, and he's not necessarily listening to her. Because he promised he wasn't going to take the V, but you knew, like, no, with his addictive personality, there's just how addicted it seems like he is to it. Because for the first time, he feels powerful. Once again, it bubbles what's already there. Huey spent so much of his life feeling weak. He finally had the strength to fight back at the beginning of this series, and that was the first time he's probably ever really fully stood up for himself. And now it's just like, but ever since then, it's just been like, every time you feel like you're taking a step forward, you take about 5 steps back. And Huey's tired of that. He's tired of feeling weak. He's tired of feeling like, right, everyone else has to save him. Starlight has to save him. It's like, it's my time to save her. And she even says a line of like, I don't need you to save me, I need you. But he can't, it's that thing of he can't get out of his own way just because of wanting to feel powerful, justifying, like, right, this is me protecting the people I love. It's like, no, but it's also, maybe there is some truth to that, but you can't fully say that it's all there is to it when your desires and what you want and everything is contorted and twisted by the fact that you're addicted to this thing because it makes you feel strong, it makes you feel powerful. You can already see the lanes of you're going down the same route as because I'm sure there's so many soups that started off like, oh, the best of intentions, but they had a bought, like, pushing at their egos, plus being powerful, being gods amongst men. Like, that's going to change you. I mean, we see that in this real life. People who don't have superpowers, who get god complexes, and this is like, you are a literal god. You have powers that no one else can compare to. Like, you are gods and no one can touch you. So of course that's going to start eating away at that humanity of yours, because you start going like, oh, you start making excuses. You keep pushing that line back of like, okay, like MM says that, we have to like draw a line. We can't cross that. We have to be better to some extent. We can't become monsters in the process. But for Butcher and Huey, whatever line they have to cross to get this done, they'll get it done. Because the ultimate goal, mainly it's kill Homelander, but truth be told, it's like we're gunning for all soups. So, the devil you know versus the devil you don't, and even the devil you don't know, but you're like, it's still better than the devil we know type of situation. So, yeah, Homelander, I thought was really interesting when Soulja Boy did his thing. Starlight was like, no, we need to do something about it. But Homelander's like, right, we'll get on the talk shows, we'll calm everybody down. It's like, the fact is that he didn't immediately like, oh, let's do something. Even though in season 1 he created a supervillain just for the purposes of like, oh yeah, the push the bill of like getting superheroes in the military and stuff. And then like, wait, but then now you have the opportunity to defeat a supervillain. It's going to make you look even better. But in that moment, I'm like, are you afraid? For the first time, it's just like, he didn't jump to action. I'm like, okay, you're willing. That's the thing. You are willing to like make everyone seem smaller than you, and you want to be the big head honcho, but then like Soulja Boy steps on the scene and you're like, wait, was that fear in your eyes? Are you scared? Is it because he's the legacy that you have to keep up with? Because you're this hero, but Soulja Boy's a legend in his own right. So maybe that's what it is, of like you being sunned a little bit by him, in the regard of like, no matter how high up the peak you get, you'll always... well, because it didn't actually try to conflate his ego by being like, oh, like, made comparisons that like, oh my god, your numbers are so high, like, not even Soulja Boy could compare. I think she said that, like, maybe episode 3, I believe. I could be misremembering, but it makes you wonder, is that why? Because he maybe immediately recognized Soulja Boy, or he saw that power and it freaked him out, because he's like, maybe that could hurt me. And it's like, we know potentially it can, because that power can also take away superpowers. Now, whether it absorbs them or not, probably not. It probably just deactivates them. Either way, he is the ultimate weapon against Homelander. I did think it was really interesting when Huey, MM, and Butcher went to go see Legend, played by Paul Reiser. It's like, hey, you know, obviously concurrent, because, you know, him as Dr. Owens in Stranger Things. But he used to be the person who oversaw, like, the hero stuff. He says, like, back when heroes were heroes and not what they are today, because basically Madeline Stillwell, she took over his position, and he kind of got the boot. But MM saying that he's the one that's always kind of supported them. He's the one that's also done a lot of the cover-ups, even Soulja Boy killing his family. You know, and it's like, right, you've done so much, but you've done so many cover-ups, and obviously it's eating away at you. Help us with this one situation, because you can at least make this one thing right. And the moment he said that, like, oh yeah, he wants to go, he was like, Soulja Boy wants to go see Crimson Countess, and it doesn't seem like it's a happy reunion. I was like, wait, did she sold him out? Because she's the one that came up. She's the one that told Grace, like, oh, it was a gun, it was a weapon or something. She's the one that told that narrative. So you're like, oh, I was like, oh, snap, did she sell him out? And we do get an answer later on. She did, in fact, sell him out. And it was like, oh, did you? I was like, at first when she was like, oh, the Russians didn't pay me, I was like, oh, was it Edgar that told you to do that? And it was like, no. And the beautiful parallels between the conversation between Soulja Boy and Crimson Countess, as well as the one between Maeve and Homelander about, we hated you. At least in the case of Soulja Boy, he's like, I loved you. I was waiting for you to come save me, but you never did. You broke my heart. Despite everything, I still loved you. And she's like, well, I hated you. We all did. And you're like, wow. You guys are so full of yourself, you don't realize how much of an asshole you all are. So part of me wonders, is like, was the rest of the team... So she said we all did. So did she make that decision on her own? Did she ever tell the others? Did she end up bringing them into the fold like later, or were they always there? Because if that's the case, we don't know where the rest of the team is. Well, we know Gunpowder's dead, so don't have to worry about that. But Soulja Boy would have come and killed his ass eventually. The TNT twins, I think they're the... Oh, there's like also that Mind guy too. They're the only ones left of the team. We don't know where they are, if they're still alive after all this time. But also Black Noir. Now that's going to be really interesting when whatever scene they're in together again. That's going to be really, really interesting, because he's probably going to be like, oh, Black Noir, well, you're a part of that, but Black Noir doesn't talk, so he'll have to write it down. I'm curious to see how that plays out. But like I said, the parallel being Maeve confronts Homelander, because he's like, right, I can smell Butcher on you. He was like, you and me, you know, he was like, I know how hard it was for you. It was lonely at the top, you know, but we were lonely together. And for her, it's almost like, fuck you, Homelander. Don't speak for me. Don't act like we were in the same situation. He was like, she's like, basically, you dragged me into this. Like, don't make it like I hated you. I never loved you. I was always your your plaything, essentially. Like, that's all people are to you. You don't really love anyone. You pretend to love someone, but everyone's lesser than you. And the only reason why you love anyone is because they love you. It's like, did you really love Stormfront, or did you love her because she loved... Like, obviously, Maeve didn't say this, but it is a conversation I had, like, in episode 2. It's like, did you love Stormfront, or did you just love her because she loved you? She put you on such a high pedestal. She thought you were, like, amazing. She thought as highly of you as you think so highly of yourself. She's probably the only other person that thinks of you in that regard. Everyone else is kind of faking it around you. But once again, fake love you'll take over no love at all. And, but she says that she pitied him, and he's like, oh, you pity me? He's like, no, I pity you. And he's like, oh, and then Black Noir snatches her up. So we don't know whatever happened to her. They saying like, oh, she's locked up in a rehab facility, because both her and Butcher did kind of break their thing. Like, she was drinking, she'd been sober for 4 months, he's been sober a year, and then they did their thing. But Starlight found out about it and went to ask Ashley about it, and she's asking Ashley, it's like, please, like, being CEO can't be worth your life. Please be human. Tell me where Maeve is. And she was about to, because she's like, I know you're scared, Ashley. You don't have to have powers. Just tell me where Maeve is. And in that moment, she was stammering, but she was like, I'm CEO, set an appointment next time. It's like, that fear, that's why I'm like, I don't know whether it is 100% ambition, because, like, shouldn't you just walk away from this? The fact is you're not willing to is just kind of crazy to me. It's like, shouldn't you just walk away while you have the opportunity? Like, who would want that position when you have to work? It's not like you're working directly under Edgar, because it's not like you even have his shielding. I mean, you never really did, but to some extent you did. Now with him going, like, Homelander has free reign, and that's going to blow up in his face. Butcher still wanted to use the video, but Maeve was like, no, he's just going to kill 1 million people, like, in the process, you know? And it's like, yeah, you kind of, you know, but if you take it all away from him, he's going to, like, fully snap. Like, holding on to this is the only thing keeping him sane, and keeping him some version of sane, rather, you know? So I was also looking forward to the confrontation between Starlight and Adrian. Of course, she couldn't blow up at Adrian the way she wanted to. It's like, because of you, Supersonic is dead. You fucking coward. Why do you want to be accepted by people who hate you? And so he was able to get the Blue Hawk thing to happen. And I love Blue Hawk being like, oh my God, like, wait, you're trying to, oh wait, is this a cancel thing? Are you trying to, am I being canceled right now? It's just like, the fact is he's saying all those buzzwords, you're like, oh, I see what time it is. I see what time it is with this character. He kind of already did before, but basically he has to make a public apology, and so A-Train breaks him down to the, because he's also like, yeah, people were African Americans. He can't even say black. He was you know, the fact is he's tiptoeing around saying black and wants to try to be like, quote unquote PC and politically correct by being like African American. Let's just, you know, that already tells you what time it is. Tells you like how full of shit that character is. And I figured you can tell he would be, but it's like, right, Blue Hawk, he's gonna make a public apology, and the fact of the matter is he couldn't even bother just rehearsing things, just at least pretending to speak from the heart. What does he do? He's reading the entire time. And he's just kind of like, right, I'm sorry. He's just so half-hearted with it. And now it's interesting. I think that's a beautiful parallel for A-Train to be on the other side of that. Because what jump-started all of this, well, not all of this, but our introduction into this story, him running through Robin and killing her. And he gave such a half-assed apology. In fact, he even blamed Robin. Like, oh, she was in the middle of the streets. Like, she was a step off the fucking curve. So, yeah. It's that, and now I think it's ironic that in the end, like, he's here right now, and he wants Blue Hawk to give an apology, but Blue Hawk is giving a half-assed one, just like you gave a half-assed one to Huey. So, but the community was like, nah, fuck you, fuck that. You did this. Once again, the conversation is, you're doing this only in black neighborhoods. And they're like, would you do this in a white neighborhood? And he starts getting riled up, and he starts attacking people like it ain't nothing, and Nathan ends up getting hurt. So now A-Train's going to give a shit because someone he cares about got hurt. That's the irony of it. It's like, right, that's what sent Huey down his path to revenge. So, like, all the criticizing you did of Huey being like, right, he had to kill his girlfriend because Huey and the others, it's like, right, you chose to do that. What I did was an accident. It's like, yeah, but the way you handled it was kind of shitty in your own right too. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing for A-Train, is him confronting, you know, whether he will like realize it or not, him confronting Blue Hulk. You know, it's not the same thing, but there's a parallel of like, right, this is who you are. Especially because it's like, you didn't start all this with the best of intentions. You didn't really care. You're just kind of like, right, okay, I'm going to get some brownie points for the community and, you know, brownie points for my brother, but also, you know, bought wins. So it's like, as he said, it was a win-win. But now it's like your brother's hurt. Your brother may never walk again. So, and now Blue Hulk's on TV being like, oh, and, you know, they're labeling it as, oh, Antifa. And she's like, okay, like switching the narrative, making it their own narrative. You add in, I didn't talk about it, but like him being like, basically like, what was it, during the meeting with A-Train and Ashley, he was like, oh, it's racist to call someone racist. But he's also like, right, how can I be racist as you claim I am? But it's like, no, I'm not racist. I have black friends. And he's like, A-Train. It's like, okay, so that's definitely going to be interesting to see where that kind of goes. I thought it was also interesting, the fact is that he's in, Nathan's in the same hospital that Kimiko is in, who now reveals, like, right, she's not healing, but also she doesn't have superhuman strength. She's human now. And she's so delighted and happy about it. She finally got rid of all those powers. Frenchie ran into Nina, who now, it's like, cool, you owe me. And it's like, right, you said, please, I, like, she wants to say, Frenchie, like, oh, you talk about, like, you've always begged me about, like, oh, you didn't want to kill people, but you did it anyway. And it's like, right, the next target is not only a father, but it's also his daughter. He's like, but a child? And she's like, she's like, you've killed children before, like, I don't know why this is any different. Because Frenchie isn't the same person he was when he worked with Nina. And he became, I think, a better person. Because I don't know if all that Nina stuff was pre the whole... Well, it might have been post everything with Lamplighter and stuff, like, the band fell apart, like, after everything with Mallory's kids, so probably after that, he started working with Nina, maybe. Well, she said, like, you met me before Butcher, so that might have even been before then. He worked with Nina, then eventually, at some point in time, he met Cherie and Jay, and then met Butcher and Grace after, like, maybe that's how that timeline necessarily works. So, but he's kind of ignoring Nina, not doing the job she wants to do. But then, like, you know, him and Kimiko are watching. At first, I was like, oh, is that Judy Garland? And it totally ends up being Judy Garland, which is kind of, I don't know if they're the intentional parallel, just knowing how hard Judy Garland's life is, and I think just like Kimiko's complications. I'm not trying to make an exact parallel, but I feel like Kimiko's had her tragedies, that I think it's just interesting that song, like, it's a Judy Garland song, and that, but she starts singing a little bit, or rather speaking, and then there's a whole musical section, which is you get a tiny bit of it in the trailer, but seeing that whole thing, and the entire time you're like, oh, that's interesting, that's all inside her head, which, interesting, because obviously the news had come out about, like, Joker 2 being a musical, or to some extent. I thought that was just kind of interesting. You know, just plenty, there's been superhero stuff that's done. Plenty of things have had, like, their musical episodes or whatever. Even superhero stuff has had their musical episodes. But I thought that was kind of a nice thing. And just, Karen Fukuhara is just an adorable human being. And she adds such an adorableness to Kimiko. You're like, everyone, please protect Kimiko. You know, it's like, because her and Starlight are the people you're just, you know, just Starlight being the good person she is, like, please protect Starlight. Then there's the whole thing with Kimiko. She's just an adorable person that who's had her tragedies, that you want things to work out for her in her own regard. So you're like, protect Kimiko, please. Because anytime, like, she smiles, you're just like, oh, it warms your heart. You're just like, once again, I think that's just like adds elements to just what Karen Fukuhara brings to that character, that she brings such an adorableness to that character that you're just like, oh, please protect her. And I thought it was interesting that after the song segment, once again, it was all in her head, that she ends up kissing Frenchie. And do correct me if I'm wrong. I know he kissed her in season 2, but it was a terrible timing because she just lost her brother. And obviously all of that sent her spiraling a bit. But I don't think they kissed afterwards, because that's why Frenchie was almost like, whoa, because she kissed him this time. And it's like, because I think they've been very close, but nothing's like that's happened, and it's like, whoa, wow, and he's so happy, but then Nina comes and snatches him up. So what that turns into, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, we have our ending where Huey and Butcher are going to be working with Soldier Boy, going to make a deal with him. It's like, right, here's Crimson Countess, we're serving her up on a platter for you, but it's kind of like, oh, let's team up. And Huey's still going down this path, and Annie is begging him not to do it, but he does. I mean, they drugged MM because it's like, right, he wouldn't co-sign what we're doing, so they're off on their own, kicking with home. You know, it's like, right, even if you get Soldier Boy to kill Homelander, like, who's to say you'd be able to kill Soldier Boy when the time comes? Or maybe he won't be able to do it. Maybe Homelander will end up killing him. The fact is that they're hedging their bets on this. This is their one go. Even Huey being like, yeah, we can kill him, and we can kill Homelander, and we can kill Newman maybe. Because it's like, oh, I love that that's still a maybe for you. Because it's like, I guess he hasn't decided whether, you know, now that she's not, well, I don't know how it's going to fare with the whole situation of now she kind of betrayed her dad, and that's kind of a public thing now. So what that, you know, maybe that's why he's like, maybe we don't have to kill Newman anymore because everything she did was because of Edgar, but she's no longer under Edgar, so maybe everything's Gucci, everything's copacetic. I don't know. And it does beg the question in that regard. I mean, because despite everything, she was someone that Huey considered a friend, but granted, it was like, right, she was lying to him the entire time, so, but Huey does leave with Butcher and Soldier Boy. So the question then becomes, you know, now the ones who are on the outs now are Annie and MM. So the consciences of the group, obviously Frenchie's taken by Nina, Kimiko's without her powers in the hospital. It's like, this is kind of, the boys are kind of a shit show right now. So we'll see how that plays out. I didn't talk about it, but the whole running into Todd thing again was interesting for MM when he's like, oh, like, it notices all this Homelander stuff, and it's just like, right, and what's the bottom line say? It's like, oh, the thing at the bottom, Homelander fights cancel culture. Like, of course that's what that narrative's going to be. But yeah, Todd's like, yeah, like, the fact is he's saved thousands of lives, he's such a great person, but then you have MM being like, no, he's a piece of shit. Because even his ex kind of saw the way Todd was looking at Homelander when he's giving his speech at the end of episode 2. Even she was kind of like, okay, what the hell that's all about? And now he's telling Janine, like, oh, he's a good person to look up to. Homelander's our favorite hero. I'm like, I wonder, is that the case? We know Homelander's your guy, even before that speech, back in episode 1 where you were at the party dressed up like him. So the question is, are you kind of forcing, you know, and I think that's a conversation where it's like, a parent can sometimes push their beliefs on their child rather than their child kind of going at their own rate and pace and kind of figuring things out for themselves. Maybe it's a little commentary on that, but just thought that was an interesting little scene that we did circle back to it, and I feel like that's definitely going to be more and more of an issue, especially because MM was so focused on going after Soldier Boy, and Janine was like, no, like, can I go to that science thing? Like, she's been waiting for it, and he's like, did I do something wrong? And he's like, no, baby, you didn't. I gotta go. Doing the exact same thing his father did. So no matter how hard he tries to stay away from this, because I heard an interesting thought some people had, that they felt like Butcher was progressing, but they feel like he's regressing. They felt like that was more so to get in line with where the comics were, but I think it plays into the very notion of this sickness that him and MM have, that no matter what they try to do to better things, they will always succumb to their need for revenge. Like, it's all consuming, and no matter how much you will always regress. Like, no matter how many steps forward that Butcher took in that year, him and Ryan and everything, he has those moments, but he's just so driven by revenge and hate that it's all consuming, and that's the only thing that keeps him moving forward. Really quickly, I want to add this in here because I completely forgot to talk about it during the review, because I actually finished it like hours ago, but then I legitimately remembered I completely forgot to talk about the Sir Comes-a-Lot, was it 779 or 776, which there's just from the funny gag of it, yes, it's really interesting, but also knowing, like, I guess it shouldn't be too surprising that there's superhero cam girls and stuff like that, and that's just such an interesting thing. But the reason why, that's just an interesting thing all on its own, but I guess it's just not only cam girls, but obviously, you know, in the time frame, OnlyFans is blown up to be what it is too. So I guess that kind of plays into like maybe the superhero. Well, because she probably doesn't really get the attention from VOD. We don't know. She's kind of been sidelined. So this is probably the only this is probably the main source of income she gets, probably besides playing shows. So maybe it's a little bit of that, but. Well, to be fair, I guess you don't really need to just be in a, you know, maybe it might not, maybe it's just like, hey, that's what you want to do. I immediately took that as like, oh, maybe she's not doing well financially, bought kind of sideline her, so she does this. But I'm sure, like, you know, now I'm thinking about it, it's like superheroes is probably, like, if in a world where superheroes exist, that's probably like a heavy kink of like, oh my God, here's this hot superhero doing some like pornographic stuff, you know? So, I mean, once again, it's just like, we already know like a OnlyFans type of situation, you can make a lot of money, so maybe that's all there really is to it. But it is kind of interesting. It makes you wonder, like, is that a big business in this universe? You'd almost assume it would be, just because, I mean, how, you know, I feel like that'd be top notch, like genre porn that people would be going after, like, you know. So just kind of, once again, just where my mind is on that. There's also the element of, well, Sir Comes-A-Lot is played by Seth Rogen. We can only assume it's Seth Rogen playing himself. They never really go into it too much. Because I feel like if he was, they would have played into it. But it's like, well, we already know in this universe that Seth Rogen exists as Seth Rogen because he was in, was it season 1? He was sent with Black Noir because it's like, oh yeah, like, we're excited to basically... God, they were talking about making a cinematic universe in a Vault cinematic universe. So, you can only assume that Seth Rogen as Sir Comes-A-Lot. She didn't say anything because I guess it's like, right, the privacy of her fans, or maybe it's just kind of like, no, like, maybe she's just not sure that, no, it's Seth Rogen. Because it also brings into question, like, right, so Charlize Theron in Dawn of the Seven, she was Stormfront. Was that Charlize Theron as Stormfront, or was that just some actor replaced? Like, you know, there's people in this who have played themselves, so it makes you wonder, is that supposed to be Charlize Theron? So that begs the question, is that, you would assume it means he has to be playing Seth Rogen because he's already in the continuity as Seth Rogen. So I don't know. That's all I can take from that. It's just fun. I mean, to be fair, like, Seth Rogen is not afraid to make fun of himself in any shape or form, but it's so crazy. And I would love it if they actually played it to like Seth Rogen, and it's like, no, but, you know, we're probably already past that because they've already probably had this dynamic for a little bit. But the fact that she just calls him by his username, Sir Comes-A-Lot, you know, so I thought that was just a tidbit that I thought that whole thing was kind of interesting on many different levels, just the layers to it. But regardless, that's just kind of all I want to kind of tag on the end here. I'm very, very interested to ultimately see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.